True courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to face it head on. Join us as we tell the epic tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the face of impossible odds. Subscribe today and be inspired by the stories of modern-day heroes and legends.
On the morning of my 35th anniversary of teaching at Garfield Elementary School, in front of 72 colleagues, former students, and the superintendent of the Atlanta Public School District, my son stood at the podium and told the entire room that I could no longer take care of myself. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I folded my hands in my lap, smiled at the woman sitting next to me, and began calculating exactly how many days it would take to dismantle everything I had ever built for him. My name is Barbara Jean Holloway. I am 68 years old. I taught third grade for 35 years at the same school where I learned to read. I raised one son, alone, after his father left when the boy was 4. I worked 2 jobs for 11 years so that son could go to college without a single dollar of debt. I bought him his first car. I co-signed his first apartment. I gave him my mother's engagement ring to propose to his wife. I did all of this because I believed that is what a mother does. What I did not understand, not until that Friday morning in September, was that everything I had given him, he had quietly been turning into a weapon pointed directly at me. Let me take you back 6 months before that morning to the spring when I first noticed something was wrong. My son Marcus was 41 years old. He worked in commercial real estate, which is a profession that sounds more stable than it actually is. Something I did not fully appreciate until I started paying closer attention. His wife Vanessa was 36, beautiful in the way that certain women are beautiful when they have decided that beauty is their primary occupation. They lived in a 4-bedroom house in Buckhead that I had helped them purchase 7 years earlier with $240,000 from my retirement savings. Marcus called it an investment. I called it love. Those 2 words I have since learned are not interchangeable. I lived alone in my house in Decatur, the same house I had owned for 22 years. 3 bedrooms, a porch with a swing. I refinished myself. A garden I tended every Saturday morning. It was modest and it was mine. Paid off entirely the year before I retired. On paper, that house was worth $680,000, which is what happens to Atlanta real estate when you have owned it long enough and the rest of the city catches up to you. I did not think about that number very often. It was my home, not an asset. The distinction matters. That spring, Marcus started calling more frequently. Not to check on me, though that was how the calls were framed. He would ask how I was feeling, whether I had been getting confused about anything, whether I had forgotten any appointments. Small questions. Gentle questions. The kind you ask someone you are quietly building a case against. I am a teacher. I have spent 35 years reading the subtext in what children say and do not say. But this was my son, and I wanted to believe he was simply concerned, so I answered honestly. Yes, I sometimes forgot where I put my keys. Yes, I had missed a dentist appointment last month. Yes, I had been more tired than usual. Normal things. Things that happen when you are 68 years old and have spent 3.5 decades being responsible for other people's children. What I did not know then was that Marcus had already consulted an attorney about power of attorney. What I did not know was that he and Vanessa had been discussing, in detail, what they called the transition plan, which meant moving me out of my house into a managed care facility and consolidating my assets under Marcus's legal control. What I did not know was that my son had been keeping a written log of every small thing I said that could be interpreted as confusion, dated and detailed, formatted like evidence. I found out the way you find out things you are not meant to know. I was watching my granddaughter, Amara, at their house one Saturday afternoon, while Marcus and Vanessa were at a home show. Amara was 6, sweet and talkative, and she fell asleep on the couch around 2 o'clock. I was washing the lunch dishes when I noticed Marcus had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. I was not snooping. I was setting a glass down next to it, and the document was just there, filling the entire screen. The file was titled Mom, Cognitive Decline Documentation. I stood at that counter for a long moment. The faucet was still running. I could hear Amara breathing softly in the other room. I reached out and scrolled through the document. 4 pages. Dates going back 8 months. Entry after entry. September 14. Mom forgot the name of her neighbor of 15 years. October 2nd. Mom repeated the same story about Daddy twice in one conversation. November 8th. Mom seemed confused about which day recycling is collected. At the bottom of the document was a draft letter addressed to Dr. Seven. Pamela Wynn, my primary care physician, requesting a formal cognitive assessment and expressing concern about my capacity to manage my own financial affairs. I closed the laptop. I dried my hands on the dish towel. I sat down at Marcus's kitchen table, the one I had bought them as a housewarming gift, and I thought about what I was going to do. The answer came clearly and completely, the way answers sometimes do when you have stopped hoping they will be something softer. I was going to let him finish building his case, and then I was going to use it against him in a way he would not see coming until it was already done. When Amara woke up, I braided her hair and made her a snack and read her 2 books about a rabbit who was afraid of thunderstorms. When Marcus and Vanessa came home, I hugged them both, told them I'd had a wonderful afternoon, and drove home to Decatur. That night, I called my attorney. Patricia Okafor had been my lawyer for 19 years. She had helped me close on my house, update my will after Marcus's father died, and navigate a dispute with a contractor who had damaged my back porch. She was 62, Nigerian-American, meticulous, and entirely without sentimentality about matters involving money and family. I told her what I had seen. She was quiet for a moment. "Barbara," she said, "how much time do you need?" 6 months, I said. "Maybe less. Then let's get started." What I built over the following months was not revenge. I want to be precise about that. What I built was a structure, carefully designed to ensure that if my son was going to make a legal argument about my competency, he would find that argument arriving at a door that had already been locked from the inside. First, I scheduled a comprehensive neurological evaluation with Dr. Train, Nguyen, entirely voluntarily, without telling Marcus. The assessment took 4 hours. My cognitive function tested in the 97th percentile for my age group. Dr. Nguyen noted mild, age-appropriate memory variation entirely consistent with normal aging. She gave me a written summary. I had Patricia file it. Second, I had Patricia draft a new estate plan. My house, my retirement accounts, my savings, approximately $850,000 in total assets, were restructured into the Barbara Jean Holloway Education Trust. The beneficiary of that trust was not Marcus. It was the Garfield Elementary School Scholarship Fund, a program I had quietly established 2 years earlier to send one graduating student to college every year. The trust was irrevocable. No one, including me, could dissolve it. It would operate under a 3-person board of trustees: Patricia, my friend Dolores, who had been my teaching partner for 20 years, and the current principal of Garfield Elementary. Third, I updated my power of attorney documents to name Patricia as my sole legal representative in the event of incapacitation, with explicit language excluding Marcus from any role in my financial or medical decisions. I did all of this quietly, methodically, with the same attention I gave to planning a school year. I did not tell anyone except Patricia. I continued calling Marcus on Sundays. I continued attending Amara's soccer games. I brought Vanessa a birthday cake in August and sat in their kitchen for 2 hours talking about nothing important. I was a good mother, a loving grandmother, a woman with no apparent concerns. What I was, in fact, was waiting. The retirement celebration was the school district's idea. 35 years at one school is uncommon enough that the superintendent wanted to make a formal occasion of it. They rented the event space at the main administration building downtown. They invited current and former staff. They reached out to parents of former students. I wore a navy blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. I had my hair done the day before. I was happy, genuinely happy, because 35 years of teaching 3rd grade is something worth celebrating, and I had earned every bit of that moment. Marcus arrived with Vanessa and Amara about 20 minutes before the program started. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit and a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He hugged me, told me I looked beautiful. Vanessa air-kissed my cheek. Amara wrapped her arms around my waist and told me my earrings were pretty. I held her a beat longer than necessary. The ceremony itself was lovely. Colleagues I had not seen in years stood up to speak. A woman named Teresa, who had been in my class in 1994, spoke for 5 minutes about how I had taught her to love reading. The superintendent presented me with a plaque. There were flowers and applause and the kind of warmth that makes 35 years feel entirely worthwhile. Then Marcus walked to the podium. He had not told me he planned to speak. I assumed it was a surprise, a tribute, the kind of thing a son does to honor his mother. I sat in the front row and smiled at him. He thanked the superintendent. He thanked the school community. He said that his mother had given everything to her students for 35 years, and that now, as she entered this new chapter, the family was committed to making sure she was supported and cared for. He said the words gently, with what sounded like love, but the architecture of what he was building was unmistakable to me, because I was the one who had seen the document on his laptop. He said that over the past year, the family had noticed some changes. He said it with a sympathetic tilt of his head, a pause designed to signal gravity. He said that they had been working with her doctor, which was a lie, and that they were exploring options to ensure she had the proper level of care going forward. He thanked everyone for understanding that this transition would take some adjustment. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when something unexpected and uncomfortable has just happened in public. I saw Dolores, seated 3 chairs to my left, turn to look at me with an expression I recognized as fury held in professional restraint. I saw the superintendent's face shift into careful blankness. I saw Amara, sitting in the second row looking back and forth between her father and me, with the confused alertness of a child who understands that something is wrong but not what. I looked at my son at that podium. I folded my hands in my lap. I smiled. Later people would ask me how I could smile in that moment, and the honest answer is that by the time Marcus walked to that podium, I had already been prepared for 6 months. The smile was not performance. It was the expression of a woman who has done her work and is simply watching the clock run out on someone who has not done theirs. When Marcus stepped away from the podium, he came directly to me, took my hand, and said quietly that he thought it had gone well and that they could talk more next week about next steps. I patted his hand. I told him it had been a beautiful speech. I told him I loved him. All of those things were true. What I did not tell him was that Patricia was seated in the back row and had recorded the entire speech on her phone. The following Tuesday, Patricia filed the documents. The first was a formal cease and desist directed at Marcus, notifying him that any further public or private statements implying diminished cognitive capacity on my behalf, without medical documentation, constituted defamation and potentially elder financial abuse under Georgia state law. The second was a letter to the superintendent of Atlanta Public Schools and the board of the Garfield Elementary School Scholarship Fund, informing them of the full and final transfer of the Barbara Jean Holloway Education Trust, effective immediately, including the house in Decatur and all associated assets. The letter included a certified copy of my neurological evaluation. The third was a notice to Marcus that, as the new trust documents superseded my previous estate arrangements, the $240,000 I had gifted toward the purchase of his Buckhead home would now be treated as a documented loan under a promissory note, with repayment terms beginning in 30 days per a legal structure Patricia had quietly established 4 months earlier with my full knowledge and consent. Marcus called me 11 times the day the letters arrived. I did not answer. I was at Garfield Elementary, helping Dolores set up the new scholarship selection committee. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October, the kind of afternoon where the light comes in low and gold through schoolroom windows, and you can hear children on the playground 2 floors below. I was doing exactly what I wanted to be doing, and my phone buzzed in my purse 11 times, and I let it buzz. He drove to my house that evening. I was on my porch when he pulled up, drinking chamomile tea, reading a novel I had been meaning to finish for 3 months. He got out of the car and walked up the porch steps, and I could see, even from a distance, that he had been crying. "Mom," he said. His voice was different from anything I had heard from him in a long time. The calculation was gone. What was left underneath it was younger, rawer, something I had not seen since he was a boy. I set my book down. I did not stand up. "Sit down, Marcus." He sat in the chair across from me. For a moment neither of us spoke. The neighborhood was quiet except for someone a few houses down cutting grass late in the evening. "The house," he started, "is still yours," I said. "I am not evicting you. The promissory note means you owe me what I lent you. That is not punishment. That is what it always actually was. Money I gave you that I could no longer pretend was a gift after what happened last Friday. I was trying to protect you." I looked at my son, 41 years old. The same dark eyes he had since he was born. The same small scar on his chin from falling off a bicycle when he was 7. The one I had cleaned and bandaged and cried over after he fell asleep, because I did not want him to see me cry. "No," I said. "You are trying to own me. There is a difference, and I need you to understand it. He was quiet. You kept a document, I said. 4 pages. 8 months of notes. You were building a legal case to take control of my life, Marcus. You stood in front of my colleagues at the most significant professional celebration of my life and implied, publicly, that I am losing my mind. You did not ask me first. You did not tell me you were planning it. You decided with Vanessa that it was time to manage me, and you went ahead and started. We were worried. You were worried about the house. I said it plainly, without anger, because by then the anger had passed through me and left something cleaner behind. About what happens to my assets when I die. That is what this was about, not my well-being. He did not deny it. That, at least, was something. We sat on that porch for almost 2 hours. I told him about the neurological evaluation. I told him about the terological evaluation. I told him about the trust. I told him that the scholarship fund would send 1 student to college every year in perpetuity, and that my name would be on a plaque in the school library, and that was exactly the legacy I wanted to leave, and he did not get to take it from me. I told him that the promissory note was not negotiable, but that the repayment terms were reasonable, and Patricia would work with him. And then I told him the thing I had been carrying since that Saturday afternoon when I stood at his kitchen counter with the faucet running and read 4 pages of documented evidence that my son viewed me primarily as a liability to be managed. I failed you, I said. Not because I loved you too much, because I never once let you face the consequence. Every time you made a mistake, I fixed it. Every time you needed money, I gave it. I taught 35 years of 3rd graders that actions have results, and I never once applied that lesson to you. That is my fault, Marcus, and I am sorry for it. He cried then, not politely, not quietly. He put his head in his hands and cried the way men cry when they have been holding something back for a long time, and the weight of it finally becomes too much to hold. I let him. I did not reach over and touch his shoulder. I let him sit in it because he needed to, and because the kindest thing I could do for him in that moment was let the feeling land. When he stopped, I handed him a glass of water I had gone inside to get while he composed himself. What do I do now? He asked. You go home, I said. You tell Vanessa the truth about what you did and why it didn't work. You go to therapy, both of you, because what you were planning is not the behavior of people who are well. And you come to dinner on the first Sunday of every month, alone, and we talk. Not about money, not about the house. We just talk, the way we used to before all of this. And Amira? Amira can see me whenever she wants, I said. She had nothing to do with any of this, and she never will. He left around 9 o'clock. I watched his taillights disappear down the street, and then I sat back down in my porch chair and finished my tea, which had gone cold, and the last 30 pages of my novel, which ended better than I expected. 3 weeks later, Vanessa called me. I had been wondering when she would. Vanessa was a woman who always needed the last word, and she had not had it yet. I answered on the second ring. She was not as angry as I expected. She was, I think, frightened, which is often what anger looks like up close. She said she wanted me to understand that she had only been looking out for her family. She said that the house was their children's future. She said she thought I would have wanted Marcus to be prepared. I let her finish. Vanessa, I said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about your answer carefully before you give it to me. When Amara is 68 years old and you are sitting on a porch somewhere, and she decides that you are no longer capable of managing your own life, what do you want her to do? A long silence. That's different, Vanessa said. It isn't, I said. It isn't. I said, it really isn't. She did not respond to that. We ended the call without resolution, which was about as much as I had expected. Some things take longer than a phone call. 8 months after the retirement ceremony, Marcus began attending therapy. He told me about it one Sunday dinner, matter-of-factly. The way he used to tell me things before he learned to perform. His therapist was a black man in his 50s named Dr. Freeman, who specialized in family systems. Marcus said he had spent the first 3 sessions mostly being angry, and the next 3 sessions mostly being ashamed, and that lately they had been doing something that felt more like actual work. I told him I was glad. He asked me once, during one of those Sunday dinners, whether I had been angry at him. Really angry, the way he deserved. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I was, I said. For about 48 hours after I read that document, I was so angry I could not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table at 3 in the morning and I thought about every sacrifice I had ever made for you. And the feeling was, it was like something breaking that I had thought was solid. And then, he asked. And then I remembered that I still had a choice about what to do with it. I could spend the rest of my life being the woman whose son betrayed her, or I could spend it being the woman who figured out what to do next. I have too much left to do to be the first one. He was quiet for a moment. I'm going to pay back every dollar, he said. It might take 10 years, but I'm going to do it. I know you are, I said. And I meant it. The scholarship fund awarded its first grant that spring. A 17-year-old girl named Destiny, who had grown up 6 blocks from Garfield Elementary and who wanted to study nursing, received a full 4-year scholarship to Spelman College. I attended the announcement ceremony and sat in the back row and cried, quietly the way I had learned to cry over the years. Not from grief, but from the particular kind of gratitude that arrives when something you work toward for a long time finally becomes real. Dolores was sitting next to me. She handed me a tissue without looking over, which is the kind of thing you can only do with a friend of 20 years. You did good, Barbara, she said. We did good, I said. What I know now at 68, that I did not know at 50 or 40 or 30, is that love is not infinite in the way we are told it is. It does not expand to fill whatever container you pour it into. It is more like water. It goes where gravity takes it, and if you have spent decades letting gravity take yours in one direction, downhill, away from yourself, pouring it into someone who is holding a bucket with a hole in the bottom, eventually there is nothing left. The act of reclaiming your own love, the act of saying this much and no further. It does not feel like strength when you are doing it. It feels like amputation. It feels like loss. It only begins to feel like something else, like clarity, like the particular piece of a thing finally done honestly. Later, when you can look back at it from a distance, my house in Decatur is still mine, at least until the trust fully activates at my death, at which point it will belong to the scholarship fund in perpetuity. Marcus knows this. He has made his peace with it, or he is in the process of making his peace with it, which is close enough. Amora comes over on Saturday mornings, and we bake and watch movies, and I read to her from the same shelf of books I read to my students for 35 years. She is 8 now, and she has decided she wants to be a scientist, which I encourage with great enthusiasm because there is nothing in the world like watching a child decide who she wants to become. Vanessa and I are not close. I do not expect that we will become close, but we are polite. Genuinely polite, the kind of politeness that is its own form of respect and that is sufficient. Some relationships can only be repaired to a certain point, and the wisdom is in knowing where that point is and not pushing past it. On the first Sunday of every month, Marcus comes to dinner alone. We eat whatever I cook, which is always too much, and we talk about things that have nothing to do with money or property or the future. We talk about books he is reading, about Amara's soccer games, about the neighborhood we both grew up in and what it looks like now. Sometimes we talk about his father, which is something we almost never did when Marcus was growing up because the wound was too fresh for both of us. Now we can hold it with something gentler. Last month he stayed until almost 10 o'clock, which he had not done since he was in his 20s. When he stood to leave, he stopped in the doorway. The same doorway he had walked through 10,000 times in his life. And he said, "Mom, I want you to know that I understand now. What you did, why you did it. I didn't for a long time, but I do now." I looked at my son, 42 years old, tired in the way of a person doing real work, eyes clearer than they had been in years. "That's enough," I said. That's all I ever wanted. He hugged me tighter than usual, and then he walked down the porch steps and got in his car and drove away into the Atlanta night. I stood at my door and watched until the taillights rounded the corner and disappeared. Then I went inside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the table where I had planned all of it, the one that had been Luther's before he passed, and I wrote in my journal for 20 minutes. I have kept a journal for 6 years, which my therapist recommended. Yes, I have a therapist too, and which I resisted for 3 years before finally understanding that the point of writing things down is not to preserve them, but to release them. I wrote about the evening. I wrote about the doorway and the hug and the taillights. Then I wrote what I have come to understand is the thing at the center of all of it. The thing I wish I had known at 35, at 40, at 55. The thing that took 68 years and one very hard season to learn completely. Protecting yourself from the people you love is not the opposite of loving them. It is sometimes the truest form of it. It says, I believe you are capable of more than this. It says, I will not participate in your becoming less. It says, the door is open, but the terms have changed, and they are not going back. That is what I know now. That is what I have. My name is Barbara Jean Holloway. I spent 35 years teaching other people's children how to read. I raised a son alone. I made every mistake a mother can make in the direction of too much. And then, at 68 years old, in a navy blue dress at a retirement ceremony, I finally stopped. It cost me something. It cost me the version of my son I had been trying to create for 41 years. The one who would never have opened that laptop, never kept that document, never stood at that podium and done what he did. That son was a fiction. Letting him go was the grief I did not know I was carrying. But the son who comes to dinner on the first Sunday of every month, the one who is sitting in a therapist's office doing the actual work of becoming a man worth knowing, that son is real. That son I did not have to invent. That son I get to meet for the first time here at the end. And that finally is enough.